This is the Arena Decklist podcast. I'm Jerry Thompson, joined by Brian Gottlieb, and it might not be that for long. Brian, what do you think about a This is only the second rebrand, I guess.
The second rebrand, third name. I mean, I'm down. I'm down for a rebrand. What spurred this on? We didn't even have a conversation about this. I was on Twitter, actually. And one of your rare posts that I saw was like, hey, we're looking for a new name. And I'm like, shit, we are? I didn't know about that.
So it's a thing I've been thinking about for a while. And then it just, it pops into my head like every couple weeks or something.
Okay.
And then it popped in again. And I was it made me more emotional than normal. I don't necessarily want to say angry, but had a lot of feelings. And I was just like, look, we should probably just do this because it's going to get worse before it gets better. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, man, you and I are just mostly on the same page about stuff. And I feel like we may have talked about this at some point, or at the very least made some joke about how our name is not really the thing anymore. Right?
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I certainly do not care. I mean, like, obviously the genesis of our new name was very much based around, looking at the future of Magic and wanting to be on top of SEO, search engine optimization. And I do not think any of those things have come to fruition or matter all that much anymore.
Not anymore. I think at the time it was good, right?
Yeah, it was smart. It was good business.
For the Twitter account, I think a lot of people found us that way.
100%.
And it's weird because I don't think there was a lot of conversion to people who then listen to the podcast, but maybe I'm wrong about that. I don't know. So I don't know. Just something I'm thinking about. And yeah, you saw it in the Twitter post. There was some helpful information and a lot of not very helpful information. And I don't know. We can talk about it when you are less busy, I suppose.
That is a good idea. When I'm back in the good old US of A, maybe we can chat about it. But it is funny, though. I actually just had a conversation yesterday with some folks down here in New Zealand about how things looked when you think back to the first Arena Invitational, an event you participated in.
Not for very long, but yeah.
Not for very long, but yes, you were there. Won by Andrea Mengucci and defeating Canister in a pretty epic final. And you think about how things looked at that moment, where it looked like Magic was going to go, how bright and promising and just like... I
mean, do you want me to remind you of the things that were going on behind the scenes?
On the outside, Gerald. I said look. I didn't say was. I said looked. Like, yeah. just the optics of that event are certainly the high point in Magic's history, I think. And I doubt we ever get to those kind of optics again. It was like a real esports type broadcast. And yeah, look where we are now, Gerald.
Listen.
$1 million prize pool.
The format.
Sir makes a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's a whole other thing. It's kind of more of the same, but it's a whole other thing. The format for that tournament was widely hated by both participants and viewers. The viewership numbers were clearly bought and paid for. And I lost round one. Granted, like, I also blew it, but like I did lose round one to a semi-invisible timer.
Yep.
Which I think is fine, and I should have known. It's just like, it's weird to make like that sort of adaptation, right? It's like you're so used to playing in the rules of a Pro Tour or something. And then the next sort of Pro Tour level event you go to, it's like, oh yeah, this weirdo sort of sudden death thing, and the clock is, not at the scorekeeper table where I would like normally expect it to be. Right. It was like I had to look like basically directly up in order to see it. And, it was just like not right in front of me. Right. So I basically just forgot it existed, even though it was like this new rule that had been implemented and should have been important. I should have paid attention to. So I lose to this in a match I'm absolutely going to win. And then because of the backlash, the fact that people were just like, well, Jerry was winning, why do you just suddenly lose? And, it's always awkward, especially as a commentator, how you then have to explain like, oh, well, actually there's this silly rule in place.
Oh yeah.
So then they just changed it for day two, which like doesn't make me feel great. Yeah. I think that someone has to be the sacrifice in order for things like that to get changed. Like if it's a rule that people don't really like or whatever, and they get rid of it, I mean, it's probably because someone got punished, right? And that person just happened to be me. So like that's kind of a weirdo first in my career.
Gerald, if you ever write a book about like the early stages of
my God, man,
dude,
I could write so many books.
Well, I have the title now.
Oh, hit me.
Somebody has to be the sacrifice. It's just like an absolute perfect encapsulation of everything that went on during this era.
Yeah. I don't think I would do it differently. At least in big picture, you know. I would certainly alter some details or whatever, but I'm not happy with the way things turned out, but I'm happy with the stuff that I chose to do.
Yeah, that's all you can do, right? I think that's good. And you know, a lot of people don't have that at this point. The way everyone's dealing with the same fallout. Everyone's dealing with the magic that is in the same place as you are, but not everyone can say, you know, they gave everything they could to try and turn things around. A lot of people say they took a lot more money out of it. I'll give them that, but you know, that only goes so far.
I want to write the MTG burn book, at least for the sake of 20-year-old Gerry, you know?
Oh, he would appreciate that for sure.
Oh, yeah. He would love it. Absolutely. Anyway, you're kind of on a timer, and we have a lot of cards to get through, so we should probably do that.
Okay. Yeah, let's talk about Magic cards. As usual, Phyrexia All Be One continued to deliver banger after banger this week. Full set is out. We're going to do one more show, just kind of, you know, giving our quick hits, talking about cards that excite us, and then we'll come back next week, do a top 10 show of some form. You know how we are about those things. Maybe let's just do a classic top 10 show. For all its flaws, I think we just go back to it and do our top 10 favorite cards.
I was going to say, I have some thoughts on that too, but man, we can save it for the next one. We'll kick that down the line. And like any sort of rebrand that comes to you, it's going to take time. It's like, we're going to have to figure out a name and like probably, you know, get all the Twitter accounts and websites and like get a logo and stuff. So like that won't be coming for a while. If anything,
man, I don't know if I have room in my house for any more rebranded merchandise. There's still like game deck boxes somewhere there, and if we add a third set of merch, I'm just going to be overwhelmed.
I'm about ready to mail out some of that merch.
Oh Lord!
So, just saying. I mean, there are plenty of people out there that do want it. If you want to get rid of it,
you come pick it up anytime, Gerald. It is ready to go.
Yeah, you come pick it up. I'm out of town, you know, so just venture into my forest woodlands, and one of your doors or windows is probably unlocked. I don't know, man.
No, we keep that shit locked down, sir. Locked down.
That's smart. You got too much synth gear. You got to protect that. Anyway.
Right.
Phyrexia All Be One. Apparently the release date got pushed back a week. I did not actually know that. I was just like Googling, trying to figure that out. And so the official release date is February 10th. And the arena release date appears to be February 7th. So yeah, dude, we got time for a little top 10 show. Let it marinate a little bit. This is different than what it has been. So
I've enjoyed it a lot more too. I've enjoyed taking our time with it and just kind of getting to know these cards a little bit better.
Feels good, man. I definitely like it too. I mean, we had to do some kind of sketchy shenanigans to do that, which I wasn't super happy about, but it has felt good. Let me tell you.
For sure.
Anyway, about 40 cards to get through, because there's just, like you said, a lot of bangers, right? This set has continued to deliver. Are you familiar with this stuff at all? Have you read the previews?
Absolutely not, Gerald. I've been so busy. Anyone who follows my Flesh and Blood adventures knows I wrote a banned and suspended article this week, and you know, a lot of work went into shaping that, and of course we're always working on the future of Flesh and Blood as well. So this is my first peek, quite honestly, and I'm excited to take it because up until this point the set has delivered to such an awesome extent.
All right, we'll check this one out. We're gonna go in Wooburg order, and at the top of that we have Phyrexian Vindicator, dub. So 4 white mana symbols.
Already love it.
5/5. Creature, Phyrexian Horror, flying. If damage would be dealt to this, prevent that damage. When damage is prevented this way, this deals that much damage to any other target.
Oh, so a little Boros Reckoner action going on here. if you remember that card, and I'm sure you do quite fondly. Your first Pro Tour top 8 on the back.
A little bit.
Boros Reckoner, yeah. And if you also remember what Boros Reckoner was capable of getting up to, there were some shenanigans there. There was Funeral Pyre. Was that the card that was in your list?
Harvest Pyre.
Pyre, yeah.
And Reckoner didn't prevent the damage.
That is true. That is true. It still took the damage. So I bet there's a whole mess of shenanigans you can get up to with this card. And a pretty similar casting cost. Honestly, Boros Reckoner did have the hybrid thing going on, so it's sort of split between red and white stuff, but also only a 3/3 body. This 5/5 flyer. A lot to like about this card, for sure.
Yeah, the flip side of Obliterator, obviously, too. So that call out is kind of cool. I'm sure we're going to see like 6 Forest, Phyrexian Vindicator, I'd rather lose than mulligan, opening hand memes. You know, the card has a lot going for it.
No, really nice design here. And, you know, as far as tournament viability, it depends. It depends a lot on what the removal looks like. I think, like, sort of given the state of things, I'm not convinced that Phyrexian Vindicator is like a game changer or anything. I think it's more of a novelty, an interesting card that people will really appreciate. Maybe a really strong sideboard option in some spots. Like, how does something like Mono Red ever beat this card? That seems just like an absolute nightmare.
Like, threaten it, you know, like that's kind of like the best thing that you can do.
For sure. But there's a lot of 4-drops that Mono Red has its share of struggles with. So it's not particularly novel in that regard. So I'm kind of low on like the playability, but that doesn't diminish how awesome I think this card is.
So Mono White is already seeing play in Standard. I don't think that this is necessarily the type of card that deck needs, but I do think that it's another tool for the arsenal. And then with the amount of dual lands that we have in Standard, I think that you could still like make this work alongside Brotherhood's End. Maybe that's like a little ambitious because of the RR or whatever, but like I'm pretty sure that you can do an almost entirely like white producing mana base with at least 12, if not 16 sources of like a secondary color to do some shenanigans. And then I'm sure that there will be plenty of people memeing with this in Pioneer and Modern. I don't think it'll be as good there, certainly a little bit slow, but for Standard, I think that this seems completely reasonable to me.
Card demands a gatherer search, right? Like, you want to know what kind of tricks, and obviously like Blasphemous Act was a big part of Boros Reckoner's appeal. Are there effects like that you can turn to? And
I didn't play Blasphemous Act. I never played Blasphemous Act.
Oh, that's true. That's true. Yep.
It's easy, right? Like, you see it and you're like, oh, a combo, like lick and stick. Like this is the thing that I'm going to do. And Raptor just found like the cheaper, better, more utility version of that card. So yeah, do some digging for sure and try and figure out what the best thing is. Maybe it is damaging it multiple times over a few turns, or maybe it is just like a big Blasphemous Act type of thing.
Yeah, we will see.
All right, next up, Crawling Chorus. I'm going to need you to hover over this one. I know that you're on.
Yeah, I actually have seen this one.
Oh my God, dude.
This
so
is
creepy.
A weirdo. Yeah.
I actually hate that this card is as good as it is. So this is dubbed for a 1/1 creature Phyrexian Horror, Toxic 1. When this dies, create a 1/1 colorless Phyrexian Might artifact creature token with Toxic 1, and this creature can't block. And it's just so creepy, but like, there are so many decks that could have used a Doom Traveler, you know? And this is certainly not as good as making a 1/1 Spirit, but I think that if there are any sort of things that you can get up to with like Toxic and having that matter, then it'll be completely fine. And the creature on the back end is an artifact creature, so maybe that matters too.
Doom Traveler is always good. What do you think is the creepiest part about this card? Because it's undeniably creepy. Like, what is it about it specifically?
Well, I'm on the text only. I'll go to the checklist real quick.
Okay, yeah, take a little peek at it.
I mean, just certainly like all the faces, but like multiple arms kind of like crawling at you is kind of weird. But I think it's the eyes for me, man. I don't know.
It's interesting because I also find this creepy. I find this creepy for a completely different reason. And basically, if I'm going to tell this story, I just have to give up I have to give up any pretense that I'm ever going to like not give full divulgence of my past to the audience. And I think I'm ready to do that. Like, probably not going back to a legal career. So I am very happy to just be who I am and admit to all of my flaws and mistakes. But in high school, I remember a particular time where I had taken a large amount of hallucinogenic substances, and
yeah, dude, whatever.
Everything turned into triangles. And I told my friends that. I'm just like, guys, everything is fucking triangles. And it became kind of a meme in my friend group, but I was just like, in that moment, very afraid of triangles. And so it's very striking to me that this undeniably creepy card comes and presents itself in triangular shape.
That is wild.
Yeah.
That's like, it's personal.
Yeah. This does feel like a personal attack against me.
That's really weird. I mean, I'm sure that there is something out there math related where it's like everything is triangles or whatever, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. And I don't know why the impetus for this would be a triangle or anything.
I mean, it kind of looks like the Elish Norn, like, I don't exactly know what's going on with Elish, if it's like a headpiece or the actual shape of her head, but it does have like that kind of shape to it.
Mysteries.
Yes.
We will never know. And I am completely okay with that.
Yep. I can live with it.
All right. No more looking at art for the cards. Anyway, Doom Traveler, great card. This is probably not as good, but very good. Will fit in a lot of places. And like Doom Traveler's in Pioneer, right? But now you get to double up if you want to.
That's a big deal.
Oh,
repeatability of these effects.
No, because it was OG Innistrad.
Pre-Pioneer.
Which was not legal because when Liliana became legal, it was a big deal.
You are correct.
Okay, so no.
Doom Traveler never saw a reprint?
I don't think so, man. Too good. We got all the bad ones.
Yeah, I can't keep any track. But there's a larger number of this effect, and like you said, having multiples can be a big deal as far as enabling certain strategies.
Yeah, more is better. Next up, Duelist of Deep Faith, 1/2, 2/2 creature, Phyrexian Soldier, Toxic 1. As long as it's your turn, this has first strike. Okay. Not gonna lie, I think it was my brain like wishful thinking, but I thought it was double strike.
Okay.
This is way worse. I don't know why I would put this on the list.
Yeah, I was like, this seems like a fine common, but like I'm good with it existing in limited. But yeah,
I
understand how I was like, the list.
Double strike, toxic, like let's go. They've dabbled in white infect stuff before, and now I just look like an asshole for putting this on the list. So we can just skip this.
I forgive you.
What if it had double strike though?
It'd be a pretty good card.
Or what if the checklist is wrong in the actual card system?
Nope, I'm looking at the card.
All right. Planar Disruption, 1/2, enchantment aura, enchant artifact, creature, or planeswalker, enchanted permanent can't attack or block, and its activated abilities can't be activated. This is just really good, right?
I mean, really, really strong pacifism effect for sure. Just covering all of your bases. I'm kind of like rereading it, looking for the fine text, like what's wrong with this card, and the answer is nothing.
Especially after the whole Duelist fiasco of 5 seconds ago. I'm like, this is just a rest plus for 2 mana, right?
No, this seems quite strong. Very innocuous. Not a card that'll leap off the page at you, but
it did to me. I was like, 2 mana removal, let's go.
Shuts down everything. Yeah, this goes real wide.
Yeah. So, not a whole lot to say, I guess, but real good.
Especially in like the sideboard context, you just get to cover everything, like no matter what you're worried about.
Phyrexian Vindicator. I guess like they can't block anymore. They can still do their own combo
shenanigans.
Stuff, but, you're talking about like red aggro needing an answer to it. Little splashy splash. It's not that big. On to blue cards. We have Tekuthal, Inquiry Dominus, 2 UU, 3/5 legendary creature for Phyrexian Horror, flying if you'd proliferate twice instead. 1 PP, I guess. Could we just use the Phyrexian mana as Ps?
I wish we wouldn't. I wish we wouldn't use 1 PP, but
1 F.
Okay, there you go.
1 Phi.
That works.
Phi is okay. Phi's one.
Yeah, isn't that actually? What does the Phi symbol look like? Oh, I need to know this for my own Phi Greek letter.
1 Phi. Remove.
It looks like that. It's a good crossover.
Okay. Remove 3 counters from among other artifacts, creatures, and planeswalkers you control. Put an indestructible counter on this.
Cycle. I've seen these multiple times across my feed, and they're all very interesting. Proliferating twice is a big deal, particularly with like another combo-ish card I saw somewhere else in this set. I don't remember the specific text, but I was like, damn, if you put a few of these out there on the battlefield, it was Planeswalker based, where like Planeswalkers gained the proliferate ability, I think.
Yep.
So it just like reminded me of old Planeswalker prison decks, and then it also gave the Planeswalkers an ultimate with like a time walk, and maybe this is part of that, where you just kind of go off and you do the dice thing and you just start stacking dice all over the place. I like decks like that as long as they aren't very good. I think they're kind of a nightmare when they're the best thing to be doing. But I like when they exist, and this card could be a fine part of that. But really, all these are so interesting because if you have these counters readily available, just having access to these indestructible threats seems very, very good to me when you're like building strategies around them, knowing they have that little extra degree of protection. Really, really nice insurance policy. And also, if you have set up ahead of time, very easy to do, right? This is just asking you to play this as a 5-drop instead, and then you have this indestructible effect available. And keep in mind, too, you don't have to fire it. You can just hold it, and it becomes this real deterrent for your opponent. So I think all of these cards have some potential. This one, again, doesn't leap off the page as like this defined standard or anything, but I do think it's a card worth building around, worth exploring.
I don't like this one as much as the other ones. Because it does have that extra 1 on the indestructible counter thing. So like you mentioned, you basically have to play it as a 5-drop if you care about that.
Is that not on all of them?
I don't think it's on all of them, no. I mean, we're going to get to some of the other ones for sure. But I think there were a couple of them that were just like, 5/5, do something, get a counter, which was like pretty awesome, honestly.
Yeah.
But yeah, if you are interested in proliferating, certainly doing it twice. I don't even think it's like a strict like this is twice as good or whatever, because it feels like things get like progressively better the more counters they have, right? It's like the 6th counter on your Planeswalker is a little bit more important than the 5th counter and so on. So
it feels close to exponential in a lot of ways.
Yeah, kinda. And we're going to get through a lot of proliferate cards, honestly, too. So it's just about finding like the best thing that you actually want to be doing and making sure that, on turn 5, you can play this with indestructibility up if you care about that. But it has the potential to do a lot of powerful stuff, but I don't know, like these cards, and I think the Kaya that we talked about, like any sort of edict type of thing is looking really good.
Oh yeah, for sure. Huge upgrade for those cards.
Like the big edict, not like sack a small thing necessarily, but like sack the biggest thing.
Yep.
Anyway, Jace, the Perfected Mind, 2 Phi, Legendary Planeswalker Jace, Loyalty 5, completed. +1 until your next turn. Up to 1 target creature gets -3/-0. -2, target player mills 3 cards. Then if a graveyard has 20 or more cards in it, you draw 3 cards. Otherwise, you draw a card. -X, target player mills 3 times X cards. So, potentially a 3-mana Planeswalker with Loyalty 3, and then you can -2 to draw a card and get chugging to more powerful -2s, or like the +1 is good. I think people really underestimated how good the Jace Vryn's Prodigy Plus was going to be.
Yep, and this is coming down in a similar time frame as well, if not earlier.
Yeah.
Like Jace Vryn's Prodigy wasn't flipping on turn 3 a lot of the time. This is, and that effect was still impactful.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, like the rest of the abilities on the card maybe are not as powerful, but it gives you something to build towards that is relatively easy to do for a 3-mana Planeswalker, which is pretty incredible, honestly.
I think this card is straight fire, actually, and would be very high on my theoretical top 10 list. The reason why it looks so good, and something that I sort of glanced over on the first pass, that -2, it accounts for either player. So very, very easy to use this as the backbone of your self-mill strategy. And if you're doing that with other cards anyway, you're going to hit that 20 card threshold at a reasonable juncture in Constructed. And then you have -2, draw 3 cards. Like, that is an ability on a Planeswalker that is just going to win games in many, many spots while it protects itself. And also there's an ultimate, which can just flat out win the game. And like, this is the type of card where you can build around this. You can have 4 Jace the Perfected Mind in your deck, be very happy at all junctures of the game when you're drawing one. And I just think like this card has the potential to spawn multiple decks, multiple archetypes around it that can actually define Standard and maybe stretch back to older formats as well. It's a really, really unassuming card on its face because the individual abilities don't stand out. But I think the total package you get here, if you are building around Jace the Perfected Mind, like, this is the linchpin of multiple strategies in my eyes.
Yeah, I think this card is really good. I've had to kind of like temper my expectations.
I understand.
Like,
I understand. I've been hurt by Jaces in the past.
Advantage, Planeswalker. It's like, am I getting carried away here? But I don't think so. I do think that this is really good. I don't think that this is, Jace Vryn's Prodigy level good or anything. Certainly not. Like, that card, it just had way too much utility, right? But this is a very, very good and also very fair version of a 3-mana Planeswalker. So I'm in, man, but I've been wrong before.
For sure. And, I might be wrong again, but there's something unique about this card. And I tend not to get too excited about Planeswalkers anymore because I have been burnt so many times. This one feels different to me. I don't know. I think there is a lot of potential for Jace Perfected Mind to be an archetype definer.
All right, next up, Prologue to Phyresis. 1U instant. Each opponent gets a poison counter. Draw a card. Bryan. I remember you talking about incidental ways
the control
to give
deck,
poison counters, and then having like proliferate control, where it's like, well, I got this thing clocking you. I just need to get in the initial one. This is really clever, right?
Yeah, pretty easy. It replaces itself, so you're not giving up anything. It's an instant. So if you are, kind of a prototypical control deck where you want to play a lot on your opponent's turn and keep up counter magic, you just get to do this when there's time. It doesn't really matter when it happens. It's just nice that it happens. Very interesting. Definitely a builder. And this set just delivering on so many archetypes to build around. It's so cool, honestly. I'm really impressed with it.
Yeah, and it doesn't feel like it has the scars problem where everything is just kind of like pigeonholed into the one thing that it does, right? It's like, oh, well, this proliferate stuff, it's like I do it on this thing or this thing or this thing, right? And yeah, you're not just stuck with like, oh, I guess I try and like proliferate my Planeswalker and that's all I can do. There's, creature-based stuff, like creature-less stuff with like these spells and everything. And then there's just stuff like oil and poison. Like, you can just do whatever the hell you want.
Yeah, exciting times to be a proliferating poisoning mage. These archetypes never quite got there in the past, but this might be it. This might be the glue.
All right, next up, no poison. Malcator's Watcher, 1U, artifact creature, Phyrexian drone, 1/1, flying vigilance. When this dies, draw a card.
Pretty simple effect, but we've seen this stuff matter before. I think it being an artifact creature is a huge part of the equation here, right? Like any of that type of setup stuff, you can really get paid on.
If it wasn't an artifact creature, I just wouldn't have even included it.
Yep. I get that.
There's some random stuff. I think there's only like one card with affinity for artifacts, and there's one that's like affinity for equipment or whatever. But there are plenty of cards that are like, for each artifact you have, blah, 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 right? So there's also like the blue-white Blade Splicer that was like if 3 artifacts ETB'd, right? So it's like just getting your artifact count up is going to matter for a lot of the stuff that you're trying to do. And not that this is great, but if the artifact thing that you're trying to do involves a bunch of creatures like moving in and out of play, then this might be something you're interested in. So
yeah, good glue, perhaps.
Distorted Curiosity. I like this one. You're going to love this one. 2U, sorcery, corrupted. This spell costs 2 less to cast if an opponent has 3 or more poison counters. Draw 2 cards.
Dude, let's go. The pieces are here, Gerald, to put these cards together. I'm actually super excited to see what you could do with this in limited. Is this like what the limited archetype looks like in blue? Are you just supposed to set up that first poison counter, play defensive, draw some cards? Like, that would be very, very cool. I love a good divination. This seems like an absolutely fine one for that type of archetype.
Yeah, like it doesn't seem that hard to get them to 3 poison counters, and then you just have sorcery, draw 2 cards. Like, I am willing to play crappy poison cards if it means that I just get like a 1 mana draw 2.
Yeah, it feels like you might get to do all this stuff incidentally. That's the best part about it. Like, it's right. You're just doing your stuff, your control decky stuff, you're drawing cards, you're finding answers, and all the while in the background, this proliferate stuff is going on. The poison counters are accumulating, and you're just like winning the game without trying to win the game. My favorite way to go about it.
All right, check this one out. Bring the Ending. 1U, instant. Counter target spell unless its controller pays 2. Corrupted. Counter that spell instead if its controller has 3 or more poison counters.
It's nice when they just give us the full deck all together, right? Like,
well, you have to, because it's like one set blocks, right?
Yeah, it just takes a lot of the guesswork out of it. So slap these 3 cards together, and I think you do have a deck going, and you figure out like what is your cheap threat, how else are you presenting these poison counters, and certainly there are options for that in the set.
For cheap threat, does Thrumingbird count?
I have played Thrumingbird before.
Not surprised.
I will say, no, it does not count. It is probably not going to be good enough. I think you need something a little bit better than Thrumingbird. But something like the, forget the name of the legend. We talked about the Dimir legendary, the Venser Corpse Puppet, things like that being your early game. That seems completely fine to me. So, all
right, final blue card. Minor Misstep. You instant counter target spell with mana value 1 or less.
This card is like, I don't get the hype. It's fine. Like it really is fine. But I've seen people go absolutely berserk over this card, and y'all are just falling into the trap of this being named similarly to Mental Misstep.
It has similar text. It's like,
but it doesn't.
Compare Peak to Gitaxian Probe. One of them is busted.
One of them is busted. Yeah, that's all you gotta do. It is that simple.
But Peak is an instant too. It's like Peak should be way better if you don't care about just it costing a mana more, which it's not even like twice as much. It's just like a million times more than
1 is infinitely more than 0. That is right. That is exactly the issue here. 1 is infinitely more than 0. And like, I'm not saying this card sees 0 play. I do think there might be spots where you're pretty happy to play this, particularly against things like Cascade decks. Maybe that's a fine spot for this to go. Although they do have a mana value. That's why they're able to Cascade. So yeah, that works.
But you could also just play Flusterstorm. Spell Pierce usually works. There's things like Invasive Surgery, right?
There's a lot of options. This is another option, but not a game changer in my eyes.
So Mental Misstep busted because you're trading 0 mana for their mana that they spend, right?
Yep.
And this is basically, at best, trading 1 for 1. Although you are the person in the position who has to like hold their mana open, right? So
that's a worse position to be in.
Yeah,
a much worse position.
The cheap counter spells that I like are the ones that potentially trade up on mana. Spell Snare, Spell Pierce, things like that. Like those are the ones that ended up seeing play. This one I do think will see play, but I think it's more a result of I need to stop my opponent from doing early stuff than it is about like how busted or incredible this card is on rate or anything.
Yeah, I'm still skeptical. Just because it's like so variable in its output. Like you just have to have things line up, and that is the opposite of Mental Misstep. So
yeah, that's the other thing too. Is like it might not line up, right? In Legacy, there's hella 1 mana cards. So Misstep was incredible. But in Standard, I think I played more Missteps than most people, but it was still only like a 2 of.
2. Yeah, that's what I remember. In the Delver decks playing around 2 and, it having a huge impact on those games, but you just couldn't afford to go all in on it because it was so variable.
Right. And then your opponent plays like a Snapcaster later or a Geist or a Restoration Angel, like there are variable mana curves in Standard. So I think that Minor Misstep is a card where if you are blue, something that can't deal with like an early creature or whatever, like say you're playing like the mono blue Jin deck, for example, I think that would be a reasonable place for this card to see play because you are really weak to a 1-drop creature. But that's kind of about it.
So you're sideboarding it in that scenario? Like it only matters if you went first, right? Like it's still a very, very ineffective card in a lot of spots.
Yeah, I mean, there are definitely spots on turn 3 where you could double counter, but you're probably not trading up on mana with them, right? But,
yes.
Maybe there's a spot where you like counter their 1-drop and bounce their 3-drop or something, and then maybe do something else with your mana. So, the problem for sure is that it is not trading up on mana. Absolutely. And yeah, the fact that you have to go first too. But
I think this sees actual 0 Standard play. I think it's just hugely flawed in that context.
I think it will see some, but it'll also probably see some at the beginning when it shouldn't be played. But
when people are making minor missteps in their deck building?
Major missteps.
Okay.
Anyway, that's the blue stuff. On to black. We have Vraan, Executioner Thane, 1B, 2/2, legendary creature, Phyrexian Vampire. Vampire is not necessarily key for Standard, but maybe for Pioneer and stuff like that. Whenever one or more other creatures you control die, each opponent loses 2 life and you gain 2 life. This ability triggers only once each.
Boo.
Of course, it only triggers once each turn.
It is a lot. No, it would be broken if it triggered more than once each turn. It could still be fine under those contexts, but I think it needs it needs kind of like some broader synergies. Like vampires might have to matter. Phyrexian Tribal might have to matter. Like this card on its face is not super exciting, especially that it has the legendary type as well.
So, legendary, not necessarily a downside, but I know what you're saying.
In this context,
you can't double up on them. But this doesn't specify like your turn specifically, right? So you can do stuff on your turn and on their turn. And if you are able to set that sort of thing up, like draining 4 per turn cycle, it is still a lot, man.
Okay.
So
yeah. And if you have control over it with something like an anvil or, Witch's Oven, those type of effects, maybe there is something there.
And the body itself, not super impactful. Like you would expect to see some sort of rider on this, like Death Touch or whatever. But I think the number is so big that I'm not really surprised that it doesn't have a rider.
Yeah.
And then I think people are just like, only once a turn and legendary, boo. And I'm just like, this still seems like a lot to me for like a 2-mana creature.
Could still be good. I mean, if you find the right engine to insert this in, like your point about crossing 2 turn cycles is really what makes this card shine, right? Like 4 is maybe an insurmountable amount for an opponent to deal with.
I don't know, man. You just think about, normal Rakdos sacrifice, but with this card in the mix, and how you're kind of like slowly draining them out with like Epicures and Anvil and whatever. And then this is just like doubling up your production, right? Which is kind of incredible because it is often a very slow burn. And then there's sacrifice decks in Pioneer that are already pretty solid, like they're tier 2 or whatever, but like this thing also like speeds them up quite a bit. So I don't know. I think this card is good.
I expect this probably triggered on itself when it started, and that proved to be way too powerful. And we're looking at a severely nerfed version of this effect, if I had to guess.
Yeah, I don't know. That's interesting. It is fun to look at cards and it's just like, did this get...
Where did it start?
Yeah, did this get nerfed or buffed? Like, what do you think?
This looks like a card that got nerfed over time to me.
Maybe.
And maybe still good, despite that.
Yeah. Vraska, Betrayal Sting. Did we talk about Vraska yet? I don't think we did.
Yeah.
Oh, no, we did. Yeah, that was the last card. That was the last card that we did.
Yeah, we definitely talked about this card.
All right, deleting that from the list. Drown in Ichor, which I'm searching for, but I know it's like 1B, -4/-4. Yep.
Proliferate. Yep.
Sorcery, proliferate. Not bad.
Yeah, going back to that blue-black control deck that we're trying to put together. Sorcery speed is a tough ask in constructed formats.
You say we. I don't know,
this
man.
might be a me thing. That's fair enough. But I think this is a nice little removal spell. Also, it interacting with things that might be like indestructible could be a really big thing. We know there's a few of those creatures, although 5 toughness on the blue one. I'm not sure where the toughness lies on the other cards like that. Comes up short with things like Phyrexian Obliterator or its white counterpart. So I think 4/4, very carefully chosen number in this context to not hit everything, but I bet it still has some good targets. And it's not hard to get a lot of value out of that proliferate ability.
Yeah, definitely agree with that. Grasp of Darkness was a card that I think a lot of decks wanted, and the mana cost ended up being a little too prohibitive.
Mm-hmm.
So it being at 1B, even at sorcery speed, I think is nice, because if you want some minus effect versus just a straight removal spell, like now you have access to it, that's cool.
It's an option for sure.
Yep. All right,
always good to have more options.
Last black card, Vat of Rebirth, B artifact. Whenever another artifact or creature you control is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, put an oil counter on this. 2B tap, remove 4 oil counters from this. Return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. Activate only as a sorcery.
Got to think about this one, man. I need to really run it through my brain juices and see what it comes up with. It feels challenging.
All right. So
feels challenging.
There was a card that we talked about that was like treasure mappy or whatever, but was 2 mana to start. I think being 1 mana to start is way easier.
Yeah.
And there are definitely a decent amount of decks that are already doing stuff that would allow this to trigger. 4 is a lot, because potentially at that point, especially if you've spent one of your mana on casting this thing, by the time you get to 4 counters on this and like have mana, something in your graveyard, et cetera, it's like, I don't know, maybe I could just like cast the thing that I'm reanimating, unless you're purposefully binning, Titan of Industry or something. I don't know. So this seems close to me, but this is another kind of those cards where it looks better to me than it actually is.
The thing that comes to mind for me with this card is the fact that it doesn't trigger off non-tokens, right? So that's where I want to go. I want to look at things like Anvil. Like
if it said non-token, I was off it.
Yeah. Like White Bitter Blossom, which is quite good at making bodies. We mentioned our Doom Traveler. So there are some ways to kind of get extra stuff to put through the Vat of Rebirth. So, is it just a good value engine in a deck that is very focused on that? Are you supposed to do things like get your Titan of Industry to the graveyard and work towards that with Vat of Rebirth? Are you a weird Esper mid-range deck that uses Jace to find the things you're trying to reanimate, and you're proliferating on top of it? At the very least, this card makes you want to explore some stuff, which is, sort of the MO of this set. It is titillating, I would say. It makes you want to look at all of these different options. Yeah.
All right, on to red cards. Solphim, Mayhem, Dominus, 2/RR, 5/4, legendary creature Phyrexian Horror. If a source you control would deal non-combat damage to an opponent or a permanent an opponent controls, it deals double that damage to that player or permanent instead. 1/5/5, discard 2 cards, put an indestructible counter on this. So this is another one that has 1 mana, but I just looked. The black one is just 5/5, but it's 5 mana to cast. So maybe that's kind of like the difference.
Yep, that makes sense. Doubling non-combat damage gets real ugly real fast. You just find your burn spell of choice, throw it at your opponent's face, and you're 6ing them all of a sudden. The fact that this will be challenging to remove from the battlefield is nice for sure. Other sources of non-combat damage, interesting as well. Things like pinging effects and damage over time type effects become pretty intriguing with Solphim. And, 5/4 body for 4. That's pretty nice for a red deck that's trying to kill you quickly. I think this card sees some play. I don't know if it's a slam dunk, but I have a feeling you can find a good home for it and get value out of it.
Yeah, I don't think it's great. And 5/4 is certainly worse to me than 4/5. Like we did just talk about the grasp, but also there's just a lot of other stuff too. Like there's new lava coil and things of that nature. So
4 very vulnerable.
It's possible that discard 2 cards is a prohibitive cost if this is kind of like the top end of your red deck also, which kind of stinks. But it's also possible that
it's big red time, Gerald. Big red time.
Right. It's possible that this could be an upside in some situations too. But yeah, also, big red or like Gruul, that sort of thing. We could, play that and win 40% of our games. That's always on the table.
I'm going back to our last card and thinking about, this card being the pitch outlet for something that has a comes into play trigger where it deals like damage to an opponent when it comes into play. And this just doubles it. And I don't even know if this effect exists, but just like 10 your opponent out of nowhere because you went Solphim into your reanimation thing.
There's a 5 mana, I believe it was common, domain card that was a face tongue.
Okay. That's a lot of work for sure.
You got triumphs, man. It's probably fine.
Maybe a lot of work to do 10. That was what I'll say. If you did 20, then you might sell me on it.
Maybe there's better. I mean, there's also the haste enchantment, right? So I mean, there's 9 because the other thing's a 4/4.
Fair enough. I think it needs a little bit more, but you'd have to do a gatherer search, see if it's out there. Cool archetype though to build around for sure.
Capricious Hellraiser, 3 RRR, 6 mana total, 4/4 creature, Phyrexian dragon. This spell costs 3 less to cast if you have 9 or more cards in your graveyard. Flying. When this enters the battlefield, exile 3 cards at random from your graveyard. Sure will be fun watching people try and figure out how to do that. Choose a non-creature, non-land card from among them and copy it. You may cast the copy without paying its mana cost.
What a weird card. Weird card. I guess there's something to be said that you do have some level of control over exactly what cards you're going to cast without paying its mana cost. Like you could go ahead and manage your graveyard effectively. And then this is enters the battlefield trigger, not a cast trigger. So
kind of surprised by that, honestly.
Yeah. There's something here, Gerald. This card is not as, I don't know if it looks innocuous. I think this card is even more devious than it looks on its face, where you can just potentially set up your omniscience or whatever completely broken thing you're trying to do with a large amount of certainty. And that intrigues me more than this just being like a fair card where I play the game and I have 9 cards in my graveyard and I get something at random from 3 of them. I think there is a way to cheat on this.
Well, yeah, you can cheat by just casting it for 6. If you're doing omniscient stuff. For standard, I don't know if there's a relic of Progenitus type of thing that's like pretty easy to manage your own graveyard or whatever, but there's Lion Sash and things of that nature where it's like, yeah, if you want to work hard to only have an omniscience to hit, then I'm pretty sure you could do that.
Yeah, maybe it's not supposed to be quite as directed and you're just supposed to do something like ramp deck that is red and green, this Titan of Industry. So can Hearse target your own graveyard as well? Or does it have to be opponent's graveyard?
I should know that, but I actually don't. I think you can, but I'm not sure.
Let me do a quick Google on unlicensed Hearse, except I can't spell the word unlicensed.
I can because of this card. Exile up to 2 target cards from a single graveyard. So yeah, you can hit your own. I vaguely remember. Oh yeah, because you could like pump your own Murktide. That's I like this card because like getting 9 cards is not easy, you know, but I feel like there's probably enough cantrippy stuff and like tormenting voice sort of things around that if you wanted to get this in on the cheap, then you could. I mean, you're not going to be able to
what
do
about
it.
our boy Jace? Like mill 3 cards from your deck. That's pretty easy.
I mean, blue red was certainly one of the places I was going to go, where it's like, think about how the Epiphany decks were set up, right? And how quickly you could churn through cards and everything. And then you could make the argument that like, well, like if you're spending a bunch of mana drawing cards, like to get to 9 cards on turn 5, does it matter that you're making this cost less? And it's like, yeah, you get the double spell at that point, right? And like every future one is going to be cheaper and everything. So I think this card is quite good, man. I like the body is not necessarily going to kill someone on its own. Like 4/4 flyer is kind of whatever, but the fact that it's potentially really cheap and you're getting card advantage from it, and you can like blink it or bounce it or whatever, all that stuff seems real nice to me.
Dude, you can just snap this off. Actually, you complete your Jace, you play it for 3 mana, and you just hard minus it, and then you mill 9 cards on the spot, and you just have this card ready to go on the next turn. I'm not saying that's good,
or you just tick up, and then untap minus 3 or
Sure,
right?
Absolutely, yeah. And if you're safe at that point, you basically guaranteed get to do it. I mean, this again very much feels like an archetype to me, worth exploring for sure.
Yeah, I think this dragon is awesome. It's hard to do. It's certainly like very archetype specific, maybe not as open-ended as a lot of the other cards in the set, but I do think this card is good. Now I have to bounce around. There's a lot of red cards that I put on the list, and a lot of them are kind of minor. I think this one is pretty good, though. Exuberant Fuseling R for an 0/1 creature, Phyrexian Goblin Warrior, Trample. Love seeing Trample on an 0/1, but this gets +1/+0 for each oil counter. I assume on it. The text version just says for each oil counter.
No, it says on it.
It's like, oh, you have oil counters? Thanks. When this enters the battlefield, and whenever another creature or artifact you control is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, put an oil counter on this. So, this can get out of control pretty quick, especially with the anvil type of shenanigans, right? And I mean, like, how much power do you need out of your 1-drop, right?
3. 3 is the answer where this card becomes like extremely, extremely powerful. And I don't think it's a stretch to get there. And it's realistic. You can get 4, you can get 5, and if your opponent is trying to not interact with you, not play creatures, I mean, maybe this just takes over a game in a lot of scenarios. It's an interesting card for sure.
Yeah, I like it a lot because the ceiling is very high, and
yes, the floor is fine.
Yeah, the floor is fine. So I don't know, man. Yeah, this just seems quite good to me. Also, a goblin, if that matters for things. I think the Goblin Lord is still running around.
Yeah, that sounds right.
Churning Reservoir, R artifact. At the beginning of your upkeep, put an oil counter on another target non-token artifact or creature you control. 2 tap, create a 1/1 red Phyrexian goblin creature token. Activate only if an oil counter was removed from a permanent you controlled this turn, or a permanent with an oil counter on it was put into a graveyard this turn.
Quite a mouthful on this card. Anvil number 2?
Sort of. I mean, like you need something else to do the sacrificing, right?
Yeah.
But
and it is
not bad.
Non-token artifact or creature you control, which I think limits it quite a bit.
Well, for the front end of it, I don't think that's that big of a deal, because it's not really like you want to put oil counters on your tokens anyway.
Well,
right?
it's not self-replicating in that case, right?
Meaning what?
Like you just
that you put an oil on the goblin.
Yes.
Yeah, but I think that's fine because
no, good safety valve.
Right. So the thing I really, really don't like about this is the 2 activation costs, right? I would much rather pay 2 up front and then have this be like 1 tap or something. But depending on what sort of oil stuff you're trying to do and how much that matters, I think is going to determine whether or not this is actually playable or not. I mean, it's fine with the Fuseling and is maybe like a very, very slow make 1/1 sort of engine, but it is very, very slow.
Yeah, this doesn't leap off the page at me. It seems okay. Doesn't have me running to build a deck.
All right. Sawblade Scamp, R, 1/1, creature, Phyrexian Beast, haste. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, put an oil counter on this. Tap, remove an oil counter from this. It deals 1 damage to each opponent.
Hmm. I'm percolating a little bit. Cast trigger, whenever you cast a non-creature spell. Reminds me in some ways of what was the wall that like untapped every time you cast a non-creature spell and you could ping off the wall.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
You don't know the name of it either, though.
I don't know if it was actually a wall.
Okay.
Well, there's like Thermo Alchemist.
Right? Thermo Alchemist. That's what I was thinking of. Yes. Not actually a wall, right? Just an 04.
Yeah. 03.
03. Yep. I mean, that card mattered. Saw play in multiple formats, I think. And this is sort of a similar version of that effect, except it's on a 1/1 body with some haste. So immediate impact. I buy this as something mono red wants to do.
I like the fact that this is a haste, like normal creature. And then when the ground gets locked up, then you start going face, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that's cool.
And with the Phyrexian Furnace thing, doubling damage, you were talking about pinging effects. This works well with that.
Yep, it does. It does. Goes to 2. Okay. The more I think about this card, the more it becomes enticing to me. I think it just like its baseline is totally fine, what you're looking for out of your 1-drop, and then you get some utility in the late game. Scales very well. You do have to sort of build your deck. I don't think you have to build around this card. You have to have some consideration of this card, though, for sure. When you're deck building, you can't just insert it in everything.
You need some amount of non-creatures, right? But I think the way that the red decks are leaning, it's not that wild to think that. I mean, especially a lot of the cards that we just talked about were 1-mana cards, right? Things like Experimental Synthesizer, just having like these cheap non-creature cards in your deck. Right. I think that's going to be pretty normal.
Right. Yeah. Good add. Good add to red decks.
Cool. Next one I'm way too excited about, and I should have learned my lesson, but I haven't. Gleeful Demolition, our sorcery, destroy target artifact. If you controlled that artifact, create 3 1/1 red Phyrexian goblin creature tokens.
We've done this before. We've absolutely done this before. What was this card called the first go around?
Vat of Rebirth.
Vat of Rebirth. Yeah. I mean, that was a powerful, scary card. It was sort of a trap given the format it existed in. But
this one is slightly better and slightly worse. Like, you get to main deck some spells if you want, and but the problem is like now you're like, all right, kill my own thing, and then I don't know how many cards actually do this or whatever, but it's like they can bounce your artifact then to make it so you don't get the goblins, or they can just like kill it in response
themselves. Yeah, some risk there.
So it's not perfect, but you get some utility out of it. And again, in the context of red black sacrifice, I think this is quite good.
It's a lot of bodies, a good, reliable way to make some tokens, dispose of extra stuff. You don't have to destroy a non-token artifact, right? And there's plenty of things
kill your blood, kill your 1/1 thing that the anvil makes. This is another way to get rid of your synthesizer on the cheap if you don't want to spend 3 mana to do it. So I think that's awesome.
Absolutely. There's something there. I'm into this card. I think I'd be careful with it. It has the potential to burn you pretty bad, but there's, again, a cool deck to be made.
Yeah, and this also allows you to get pretty wide, which I don't know how much you want to go down that rabbit hole, but...
Well, there's Battlecry in this set, right? Like, that matters a bunch.
Yeah, we should probably not do that, because that was kind of the whole Rebirth thing, was Battlecry. And the Battlecry cards that I have seen have not been good.
That is true.
So, all right. A couple cards left. Nahiri Sacrifice, 1R sorcery. As an additional cost to cast the spell, sacrifice an artifact or creature with mana value X. This deals X damage divided as you choose among any number of target creatures. Yeah, you don't like this one, do you?
This being a sorcery kind of kills it for me, man.
I like this as a very, very niche sideboard option. Like, if you're playing any sort of like creature mirror, this seems maybe kind of awesome to me. This is just like Plague Wind for 2 mana, basically.
Plague Wind for 2 mana after you've played your, what, 5-drop?
I mean, it doesn't even have to be that big, though. That's the thing.
Depends on the scenario. Like, I could see this being important in, like, small ball mono red mirrors, for sure.
Right, or you're, a little bit of a slower mid-range deck that is playing against, like, mono white aggro or something, right? Like, it's pretty easy for your 3-drop that maybe you got some value from to then transfer into this and kind of just wipe their entire board, or at least
is this your best option, though, to do that? I mean, you're investing 2 cards at that point. You have already made a mana expenditure to get it to the point where it was killing enough things. Couldn't you just have expended that mana on the thing to be the answer?
I mean, you could say that, like, Brotherhood End is a better sideboard option, and that might be true, but, like, there are definitely going to be scenarios where your deck does not make RR all that effectively, right?
Yeah, true.
And like, say the ground has kind of stalled where you have a bunch of, like, 3/3s versus their 2-power stuff, like, then the whatever sweeper would reset you, but this being a sort of Plague Wind actually does matter, right? Because you get to keep everything else too if you've actually extended a decent amount.
So I'm very skeptical, but I will say that the context of, like, just playing tremendous stuff and then using this card as, like, not with the goal to play my tremendous thing like Titan of Industry and then throw it to Nahiri Sacrifice, obviously, because then you've just lost your Titan of Industry. But something where, like, this is functioning as a bridge where you have a target in the mid game that you're very happy to Nahiri Sacrifice, and then in the late game it scales very well because your late game does consist of getting up to that 7 mana threshold and having this, like you said, one-sided Plague Wind. Then I become pretty interested in this card if you can find those type of setups. I don't immediately have a shell for that in mind, but I believe it could exist for sure.
Yeah, I think stuff like this is almost certainly way better. Man, not even 10 years ago, more like 15 years ago.
Yeah.
The way that matchups played out, right? But I do think that there is a potential time and a place because, like, the small ball creature decks do still exist in a lot of instances. The problem sort of exists where you're right that it being a sorcery is not great, and not because, like, oh, I'll use this in response to your removal spell or whatever, but it's like they could have haste creatures or creature lands, flash creatures, like, whatever, where it's like, oh, this doesn't actually solve all the problems or whatever. And then, they could also just have planeswalkers or something, right? So this is definitely very, very narrow in scope. I'm just saying, I read a card like this, I see a time and a place for it.
That's good. Yeah, that's what you should do with cards like this. Yeah, that's what you should do with cards like this. Find a way. It doesn't do any good to be like, this is a shit card, move on. It does way more good to be like, is there a spot where I can leverage this? Where is this more powerful than other options? And then you have that in your tool belt when the time comes.
I remember when I read every card on a spoiler and was just like, unplayable. They're all unplayable. And it's like, well, clearly that's not true, right?
Right.
And it has become far more satisfying to look at cards and see the upside and where they fit in. And also, hopefully be able to make a judgment as to how much that is going to matter. And I'm saying that this is going to matter not a lot, but the times when it is going to matter, it's going to feel like the most important card in the matchup,
Yep, that's cool. That's a great thing to identify.
Last red card, Cacophony Scamp, R11, creature, Phyrexian Goblin Warrior. When this deals combat damage to a player, you may sacrifice it. If you do, proliferate. When this dies, it deals damage equal to its power to any target.
Mog Fanatic back after all these years. So good to see him again.
Not quite.
I said Mog Fanatic.
I said a lot of, like, R11 adjacent creatures.
Interesting abilities on them. Yeah.
And it wasn't like we were hurting for those before, So now we just have a ton of options.
Yeah. So, we talk about redundancy. First thing I want to do is, like, is there a deck where I play 31 drops and I could also rebirth them and, like, get some kind of value in the end game by just being able to vomit my hand onto the table because my deck is entirely 1-drops. I think the answer is probably no, but that is something worth exploring for sure.
Yep. On a green, we have Thrun, Breaker of Silence, 3GG, 5/5, legendary creature, Troll Shaman. The spell can't be countered. Trample. This can't be the target of non-green spells your opponents control or abilities from non-green sources your opponents control. As long as it's your turn, this has indestructible.
I think this is worse than it reads. I think there's a lot of big, scary text on this card that makes it seem like this is the truth. This is the answer. This is the new Carnage Tyrant.
What's bad about it? Because I think this is pretty good.
I think it is.
For what it is. This is not a card I'm interested in playing. Not really my style, but I think that the text is appealing.
I think its sizing is actually like laughable in the context of what green does these days. Like 5/5 for 5 is not what I'm here for. You can get so much more out of your green cards. I think it being uncounterable doesn't jump off the page as something that's super important for standard. And you can only consider this card in standard context. Like, I don't think it reaches back all that effectively.
Agreed.
Target of non-green spells your opponents control or abilities from non-green sources. Wonder how much spells in standard skirt around that.
Things like Unleash the Inferno.
Yeah.
Which is a green gold card, or if there's, Putrefy type of thing.
Yeah.
But the Jundex can also play the Edict, which, again, those things look pretty damn
Seem
good.
More important. Yeah, I think -5 will also be important. As long as it's your turn, Thrun has indestructible. That is actually something that really stands out to me because
can always attack.
Yeah, but one of the best use cases for a card like this is to, like you think about OG Thrun and what he did. It's that you had some sweeper insulation as well. You had the regenerate clause on OG Thrun, if I recall correctly. Yeah, and like that's a really important part of the equation because the type of things you want to punish with this are like the hard control decks, things that do a really, really good job of just turtling up. And now you play Thrun and they have no answers anymore. But you can sweep this. Like, this is just very vulnerable to sweepers. And I think that's a fatal flaw in a card like this.
Or you can use it with your own sweeper.
You could.
You can burn down the house. You can rat.
Yeah, that's cool. That's a nice application for it.
I think that if any of these different 4 lines of text were not here, I would be less excited about it. But like all of them together are really nice. Like trample on your big silly, can't touch me kind of card is so good. Like Carnage Tyrant was good because of that, right? Otherwise, these things just get chumped for eternity. Troll Ascetic and like people were trying to like put equipment on their Troll Ascetic or whatever. They found that out. You know what I mean? And even OG Thrun kind of had that problem to some degree. It did. But indestructible on your turn and trample is pretty nice. I don't think there are a lot of things that effectively block that. And I don't think that there are a ton of things that like target this and kill it. And I think that if it could be countered, well, that's a pretty big hole, right? Like you can't use this against some sort of blue deck. So I don't know. I like all this text. I think it's all pretty good. I do think that this sort of thing is mostly a sideboard card because, as you mentioned, for the most part, green 5 mana, you can do better in a general context. But if you're looking for something specific, I think that this is pretty good at doing what it's supposed to.
Yeah, I think in standard right now, it's sort of easy to block this out, honestly. Like you have enough cardboard and numbers to throw in front of it and make this less effective. So it can only really shine to me in the context of creatureless setups. And then I just think they're going to have enough outs to it.
I mean, are you saying like you'll have a 6 toughness thing or that you're
maybe you trade, but like if you trade with this card,
you don't trade because it's indestructible on your turn.
Right. Okay.
That's what I'm saying. It can always attack.
I'm thinking of it in the context of removal. Okay. No, fair enough. I misread that for sure. Okay. I'm coming slightly around. I still think there's some holes in this card.
There are, dude. Absolutely. I mean, I don't think this thing is supposed to be like hexproof, trample, haste. Like no problems whatsoever, right?
Right.
Like,
You need to find a niche application for it.
yeah. And I think that it is broad enough that there are going to be a wide swath of matchups where this is applicable to the point where this does see play in sideboards.
Okay. That's a fine conclusion. I still think my point of like this not being akin to Carnage Tyrant stands. I mean, Carnage Tyrant was a format defining card, main deckable, very, very important. I don't think this raises to that level, but it sounds like you agree with me on that point. So no dispute here.
Yeah, no, I do agree with that. And I think the fact that Carnage Tyrant was main deckable was indicative of a format that had some problems.
Yeah, no, I agree with you.
So if we get to the point where Thrun is main deckable and like not just main deckable, but you're happy about it, you're just super stoked this is your best card, then yeah, again, you got problems, and that's not a great place to be. But thankfully, I don't think that we have the Carnage Tyrant sort of issue. Like, I played with Carnage Tyrant. I hated it. Just like big, dopey green creature that they can't kill, they can't jump block or anything. It was just silly. I didn't like it.
Yeah. And
speaking of that,
not in a good way. Yeah, I had a feeling where we're going after that.
Tyrannax Rex for GGG, 8/8 creature, Phyrexian dinosaur. This can't be countered. Trample, Ward 4, Haste, Toxic 4. These two being in the same set is pretty weird. If you want a Carnage Tyrant kind of thing, this does a lot of the similar stuff. Ward 4 is very similar to Hexproof in a lot of cases, and then Haste Trample is really big, and I don't know.
I think accelerating to this card is pretty messed up. Like, it's going to be really, really hard for anyone to respond to this effectively if you're playing it ahead of curve. This on turn 5 is just like, it feels like you're kind of winning by turn 6. Like, I don't really know what the counterplay is here. I guess it's counter spells, right? Oh, this can't be countered. Forget it. Never mind. This is unbeatable.
No. Yeah.
Just completely unbeatable. Yep. Yeah. I don't know. This card seems like a dumb Carnage Tyrant to me, where you just go ahead and hit your 7 mana threshold and your opponent is kind of screwed.
Yeah, big score, reanimation. I'm like kind of happy that the Throne exists. I'm less happy that this exists, and I'm certainly less happy that they exist in the same set.
Yeah.
And certainly not happy that one of them seems like much better suited to its job than the other. So
well, it depends how you define their jobs. Like, is it like, do you just want a format where you ramp to Tyrannax Rex and that is the game that you've played? To me, that would be a huge failing. Like, I hope this card is not as good as it looks on its face to me. Because like, I like it when 7 drops matter. That's really good. Something like Titan of Industry has had, in my eyes, a very positive effect on the format.
Yeah, I would rather this card had Hexproof and didn't have haste, you know?
Sure.
It's just like, okay, yeah, it's Carnage Tyrant, whatever. That's fine. The fact that it has haste and it has a thing where it's like, oh, yeah, Ward 4, like, you definitely have a shot to kill this, buddy. And it's like,
how?
What the hell am I supposed to... Yeah,
how?
Exactly.
I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. Like big sacrifice
edict or bust.
Yeah. So, pack those for a while, I think. Otherwise, there's going to be a large vulnerability in the format to this card. And once those cards like make their way into decks, I do think like this is kind of prevented from taking over the format. There's no real counterplay to that. If you invest everything into ramping into a Tyrannax Rex, and there is a big edict, and there is a big edict in the format, right?
There's multiple, I think. Like the Jund one definitely exists, and I think there's another one.
Yeah. So once that happens, like this becomes a pretty losing prospect. But I could see this card absolutely stealing early tournaments for sure.
I mean, the silly thing is, though, is like the Jund decks still only get to play 4. Like Soul Shatters is kind of like the other one that I was sort of thinking of. I actually don't even know if that's legal or not, but
I feel like that rotated.
There's almost certainly another one that's like that. But like, say you're doing Jund stuff, and you're like, well, I got my 4 big edicts or whatever, and then your opponent's playing like Thrun into this thing, and it's just like, okay, I mean, I only have 4 edicts. Like, what the hell?
Mm-hmm.
And then, I mean, people were already potentially like sideboarding in duress in Jund mirrors and stuff too. So there's like that whole thing. It's like, even if it gets to a point where, you know, the card is so good that you need to play Edict to beat it, which is like kind of silly, and I doubt it'll get to that point, but it doesn't even seem like that's enough to actually stop them, because you're almost never going to be like all in on this card. Like, oh, I have to Rex them and I have literally nothing left. Like, it's so unlikely.
Yeah, you're looking for you know, a ramping creature, of which there's some pretty interesting ones in the set. So yeah.
All right, let's keep going. Nissa Ascended Animist, 3GG 5/5, so 7 total. Loyalty 7, Legendary Planeswalker Nissa completed. +1, create an XX green Phyrexian Horror creature token where X is Nissa Ascended Animist loyalty. -1, destroy target artifact or enchantment. -7, until end of turn. Creatures you control get +1/+1 for each forest you control and gain trample.
So only 6 versions of this card. A lot of restraint showed by Wizards here on this one. So let's do the breakdown of play pattern on this. So,
well, actually, hold on, because I know that you're going to get to this, but like, is this the only one that has like multiple 5s?
I believe so.
Okay, I believe because so. Completed is for each 5, it gets 2 fewer loyalty.
Yeah. Right? Yep.
Go ahead.
So we're looking at, if we are to play this as a 5-drop, we will get a Nissa with 3 loyalty. We will +1 get a 4/4 green Phyrexian Horror creature. We have a -1 ready to destroy a target artifact or enchantment. -7 ready to do this overrun effect that is potentially huge given how many forests you have. As a 6-drop.
Yeah, at 5 mana, it's pretty tough to like get to that 7.
Right? Agreed. As a 6-drop, we are now looking at +1, get a 6/6 creature. So, you know, we're already coming out okay in terms of a 6 mana investment. We're at Dreadmaw Colossus stats, everyone's favorite card. So we've done something special. We are
you're paying through life. You're getting the Dreadmaw and a Planeswalker.
Yeah, 6 loyalty Planeswalker, very hard to challenge. That Dreadmaw ready to play some defense, looking
Dreadmaw
pretty good there.
Though, right?
I think so. Don't worry, we're gonna get there. We're gonna ultimate, and it'll be fine.
Word.
At
smart
full retail 7, we're plussing this, getting an 8/8 creature, and on the next turn are ready to give all of our creatures +1/+1 for each forest we control. So just,
which is clearly 8. Right.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm just jamming this in my mono green deck and winning on the spot. So sort of, I'm kind of a believer in like the linear version of Nissa, where I just play a bunch of ramping creatures, get to this as fast as possible, +1, make my 8/8, next turn -7, GG, I've won the game.
I kind of like just playing this for 7 and immediately ultimating.
Okay, sure.
Like, assuming you are playing mono green, right? It's just like 7 mana +7, all my stuff. Like, yeah, that's not bad.
That's not bad at all. That's not bad at all. And I could see that being a play pattern that comes up from time to time.
It's a hell of a fireball.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting because, you know, you sort of want to tap your stuff to do this a lot of the times. I think that's how you're getting there, but not that many mana creatures in Standard. So maybe that is less of the plan than I'm thinking, and you're just kind of like naturally progressing to this 7 mana state, and you have a jumper at some point. That's something that's +2 mana in your list, so you're pretty happy playing this on 5. And it's interesting. It's an interesting card. It's very linear in its application. I think it's -1 is more of a safety valve than an actual feature of the card, but it'll be nice to have for sure. You'll -1 quite often, I think. I don't know. I don't know what to make of this card. I think it's very good. I think it's very good. I think it's very narrow. I think it is very beneficial for a certain play pattern. I also think it's competing with the big dumb dinosaur in some ways. So yeah, you have to consider that a little bit. And there's only so much room for giant 7-drops in a format, as we've discussed in the past. I don't know. I think if you asked me to make a top 10 now, this would probably be like towards the low end of my top 10.
I don't really like the 5 mana version of this, and I think that is the one that you're going to be casting the most, unless the -1 has like an absolute ton of utility. But I think most of the stuff that you can -1 on, like the playable stuff, is all the kind of like rinky dink things that you don't really mind getting blown up.
They
It's
also
not
get
like,
immediate value. So like Fable,
right.
Wedding Invitation, you're
Yeah.
just
So
ahead
it's,
of the game. Wedding Announcement, I'm sorry.
yeah, it's kind of weird to me, but certainly like as the game goes on, and if you are mono green or at least have a lot of forests, I think that the 7 mana version is very, very threatening, and that by itself is worth a look. And then, yeah, maybe if you're like 5 mana, make a 4/4, and you have a 4 loyalty planeswalker, like that's okay. It's not great, but the card has a lot of utility at least.
It depends on the matchup, honestly. Like context dictates whether that will be great or not. And I can see spots where it in fact will be great, where you're just chaining out giant creature after giant creature that could batter in several spots. So it's interesting.
Yeah. I don't think I would have this initially on my top 10, but could very quickly be proven wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Evolved Spinoderm, 2GG, creature Phyrexian Beast, 5/5. This ETBs with 4 oil counters. It has trample as long as it has 2 or fewer oil counters on it. Otherwise, it has hexproof. At the beginning of your upkeep, remove an oil counter from this. Then if it has no oil counters on it, sacrifice it. So clearly a Blastoderm throwback for the first turn. It has hexproof, then it gets trample. Blastoderm really, really want to trample. I don't know. It's funny that you like kind of like remake or reimagine cards like 20 years later, and it's like I don't know if it holds up. I don't know if that's the thing that we're supposed to be doing. It is a cool callback for sure, but
this card does not strike me as playable, honestly. Like given the context of everything else, and it's funny because you think about how iconic Blastoderm was, but yeah, things have changed.
There's like 4 mana 8/8s
Yep.
that you can play, right? And I feel like that's better.
I think it is.
All right, Evolving Adaptive, which feels like it's missing a word, but G. For a 0/0 creature Phyrexian Warrior, this enters the battlefield with an oil counter on it. It gets +1/+1 for each oil counter on it. And whenever another creature enters the battlefield under your control, if that creature has greater power or toughness than this, put an oil counter on this. So
the evolve action going on.
Yeah, Experiment 1. The regenerate on Experiment 1 was
good.
It was not that bad. It didn't come up a lot, but I think that this is easier to make happen when there are more things that actually give out oil counters and proliferate and all that sort of stuff. And if you're looking for just like a 1-drop that can, for example, like get to 3 power, kind of like what we talked about before, or in the case of, mono green and standard, go pretty far beyond that, I think that this seems like pretty reasonable, pretty good.
Seems reasonable to me. I also think that oil counters matter more in a lot of context, well, at least in the context of this set, than like +1/+1 counters could in other contexts. So could be something there. But I think in just terms of base stats, yeah, Experiment 1 is a good callback. That card felt extremely powerful at times. And I think mono green struggles for its 1-drops. This seems like a fine gap filler for them.
Rustvine Cultivator. G, 1/2, creature, Phyrexian Elf Druid, tap, put an oil counter on this. Tap, remove an oil counter from this untapped target land.
Okay. I mean, slow moving here, but when we're untapping lands that are worth more than your average land, certainly this card becomes much more exciting.
Yeah. So are there ways to do that? I don't know. I think there was something I looked at because I feel like one of the other cards also does this. I would have to look at like my old garbage arena decks that I never fully built, but I feel like I think it was the thing that was like for its power, and I was trying to like pump its power. Maybe that was it. I don't know if there's like an overgrowth or even like a wild growth that's playable that you could use with this, but even if it's just like a mana creature that you get to use every other turn, I think that's pretty good for a 1 mana 1/2. Also, again, oil counters, things that maybe you can distribute or proliferate, which is cool. There's a lot of blue-green creature-based proliferate stuff that doesn't necessarily look constructed playable, but Certainly if you get that stuff going, like this is just going to be an all-star in that sort of deck.
Can we talk about this card in Pioneer? Because there, I think it actually becomes quite interesting. It is an Arbor Elf that can look towards Nykthos. It can also look at Lotus Field. And
some of the Lotus Field decks were playing a thing that untapped a land. I think it's like a
2-drop. It was a 2-drop, yeah. And it was quite effective in those decks. And, that was certainly a stronger effect. But doing things as a 1-drop for that deck, which is mostly not doing things as the early turns go on, and you're kind of limited to Arboreal Grazer in a lot of spots, having another 1-drop option could be quite meaningful. And, I think in the Devotion decks, this kind of is a little win more. Like if you're at that point of setup, you're usually doing pretty well.
I don't know. It seems pretty good to me. Also, you have Old Growth Troll to
double scale up on. Yeah, no, that is very true. Could be something there. Gerald. I wouldn't sleep on this card in older formats.
Yeah, I mean, the first thing that came to mind was Amulet because they've played cards like that. But obviously, you would just want something that doesn't have the delay on it. And I didn't necessarily think about Pioneer, but I like this a lot in the Devotion deck. And there was the Evolve card, or not Evolve, but whatever the hell that mechanic's name is, that untap the land, where it's like, okay, well now the deck is like speeding up by half a turn. This might also speed up your deck by like half a turn. And
Maybe.
I don't think that deck needed that stuff. So
but we'll take it.
Yeah. I was down on the deck because it's tier 1, but it wasn't far and away the best deck. And if something is far and away the best deck, I will happily play it regardless of what it is. And now with this card, I'm like, well, it's getting to the point where it's kind of hard for me to argue against just doing it because everything just seems comically easy at this point.
It didn't need the extra upside, that's for sure.
No, it could have been Forest and would have been fine, but I think in the case of it doing proliferate stuff and like maybe it being a limited card and everything, that it being any land makes sense.
Oh yeah. I would have done it that way as well, flavor wise for sure.
Viral Spawning, 2G sorcery, create a 3/3 green Phyrexian Beast creature token with Toxic 1 corrupted as long as an opponent has 3 or more poison counters, and this is in your graveyard. It has flashback 2G. Similarly,
Call of the Herd.
Similarly to Blastoderm, you make this card 20 years later, and it's like cricket noises, basically. I do think that there's like a time and a place for a thing like this, and where it could be good, but I'm not stoked about it.
I don't think this card is good, but I do appreciate that they do things like this for us old heads to, even if we just get to talk about Call of the Herd and how it was a format-defining card during its period. I remember when I first came to Magic Online, Call of the Herd being like 30 tickets or something like that. Very, very challenging to get my full play set, which I eventually did as I grinded from nothing with my mono black deck that had to play the worst version of Nantuko Shade because I didn't have the money for Nantuko Shades either. But we eventually got our full set of Call of the Herds and were able to play all the top decks in the format. And
dude, that's like OG Magic Online when you're a broke kid.
Yep.
Was like the best version of card acquisition, I think.
Totally agree.
Wasn't it?
You can make something out of nothing. And then
And then after that, you're making actual money too.
Yep. At the way my Magic Online experience worked was it was during like one of my summers from college when it released. And when I was at college, I was way too busy just drinking and being a degenerate the entire time to invest time in Magic. But over that summertime, I just like kind of worked, saved up money. And when I wasn't working, I was playing Magic Online. And I didn't have much money, so it wasn't like I could just buy my way to the top. I just kind of grinded from nothing. And then at the end of that summertime period, when I went back to college and I knew I wouldn't be playing as much Magic anymore, I got to cash out my collection. I remember getting a check in the mail for like $400. And I'm like, this is the greatest thing that has ever happened to me.
You only got 400?
Yeah. That's the number I remember anyway.
Yeah, I guess the margins were way worse back then.
For sure.
It wasn't just like bots undercutting. It was more akin to real life, where if you're selling, it's probably for 50 to 60%.
Well, the fact that I got the check in the mail certainly points to that, right? Like an actual mail check was very different.
Yeah, I mean, I was definitely there. Like, I definitely got checks in the mail from people too, But I feel like whenever I sold my account, it was for like $2,000 or whatever. I think there were multiple times I cashed out for $2K. But
yeah, the final time I sold my Magic Online account, I remember getting $9K. Okay, that was like for the full thing. But in this instance, so again, keep in mind this is like 3 months of playing. So I built out the format, and I don't even think the format was complete. Maybe it was complete at that point, but maybe I was avoiding like the IPA cards because they were super expensive at the time, or for whatever
they
reason.
were. Deed was 7 tickets, man. I couldn't believe it.
Way too much.
I had to be so rich before I bought Deeds, because it was like such a huge expenditure, and that allowed me to splash around with, like, Deed was not playable in standard at that point. And there was like some really, really awful Burning Wish control deck. It was like Tainted Pact, Burning Wish, Deed, Factor Fiction, like 4 colors, right?
Yep.
And my win condition was Burning Wish for Living Wish for a Psychotog.
Yeah. Those were the days.
And it was just like, okay, I am rich enough now where I can afford to like splash around. And then Orm's Chant was like 80, which I was just like, I'm never gonna bother with that. I don't care if like Scepter Chant is like the absolute best thing you could possibly be doing. I'm not gonna sell like 3 decks to build Scepter Chant,
Yeah, I remember my progression being like mono black control, blue green madness, like red green Meteor Storm, Call of the Herd, aggro-ish stuff. Then I remember playing the Phantom Nishiba Hunting Grounds deck for a period of time. That might have been about the end for me. That might have been about when I cashed out.
Yeah, you were playing bad decks, man.
Yeah. Oh yeah, real bad.
You're playing Hunting Grounds. You're playing Hunting Grounds. I'm playing Mirari's Wake.
Yeah, must be nice.
Dude, Wake was busted. It was great.
It was very good.
Dude, back in the day, I could just sit there and jam like the best version of the best deck, and it was fun for me. I can't do that anymore. Now I have to be learning something.
Same. Yeah, just sit there and get your $5 an hour and be very, very happy about it.
Way less. Last green card, Thirsting Roots. G sorcery, choose one. Search your library for a basic land card, reveal it, put it in your hand, then shuffle or proliferate. I liked the Prey Upon version of this card. Proliferate now with like the oily stuff seems all right.
Yeah, this effect is good. I mean, we've seen this effect shine before. It usually needs to come with some extra value. This, you have to choose one. Maybe a little bit of learning a lesson there, and not just giving a little extra effect on top of the basic land searching.
Yeah. I mean, I think they're all choose one except for the energy one, right?
Yeah, what's the name of that card? I'm blanking on the name of it.
Attune with Ether.
Attune with Ether, yeah. Banned card in standard. Very interesting. But Thirsting Roots, I have a feeling will not find a home. That's my bold prediction here. I do think these effects occasionally matter. Proliferate feels a little disjointed, though. I don't think it's exactly what you're looking for in this effect. And, maybe I'll be proven wrong and there is enough, because it does do that like early game, late game thing, right? Where this is supposed to be an early game card to fix your lands. And then in the late game, if you've done enough work, proliferating can easily be worth 1 card, sometimes 2 cards, sometimes 3 cards in the best scenarios. So,
and when we're talking about
the balance there,
when we're talking about the Nissa and like ramping up the Nissa, or like you untap and start your turn with Nissa at 6, and then you just have this card that like proliferates and you ultimate out of nowhere. I mean, that's kind of cool, but also weird to just be like sandbagging this card for forever, I guess. So
it is.
Yeah, it is. Not a card that you're going to play a lot of either way, but
yeah. So this is going to pump your Rustvine Cultivator perhaps to get an extra activation out of it. It matters with your evolving adaptive if you've already put an oil counter on it to get an additional oil counter. So there are some really cool synergies on the low end of your curve that you can get from this card.
Keep your Blastoderm around for an extra turn. Maybe
extra
that matters.
Blastoderm, easy game.
I don't know why you put the Blastoderm in your deck, but
don't worry about it.
All right, on to the gold cards. Fully aware that this is probably just a commander card, but Atraxa, Grand Unifier, 3G Dub UB. So 4 colors, 7 mana, 7/7, legendary creature, Phyrexian Angel, Flying Vigilance, Death Touch, Lifelink. When this enters the battlefield, reveal the top 10 cards of your library. For each card type, you may put a card of that type among the revealed cards into your hand. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. And they list out the card types, Brian.
Yep.
And among them is Battle.
A lot of talk about big changes coming to Magic the Gathering, which is terrifying because the level of changes which aren't identified as big changes these days are pretty freaking massive already.
Who said big changes?
That is something that Mark Rosewater has been hinting towards for a while now.
Oh.
In terms of...
Was not aware.
This year. Yep. So maybe that refers to Battle. Maybe that refers to something else. Nobody knows, but it is something we're going to have to keep a close eye on. I am okay with there being more card types for the most part. It really depends a lot on the execution. It's not even worth speculating on. My thing. If you keep the original language of Magic, I'm all for expanding. When you break from the original language of Magic, that's when I start to get a little uncomfortable with it. And so things like energy counter is very low on my list of mechanics because I do feel like it betrays the original language. We'll see what Battle does. If it's in the vein of cards I like, or if it's in the vein of cards I rebel angrily against.
What about 7 mana, big card, bunch of keywords, like draw 4 cards?
It's fine. It's fine. Is it better than Titan of Industry, which is kind of how I look at these cards for the most part? In some scenarios, yes. In some scenarios, no. I think that I don't want to build around this card. So if I just naturally have a spread where I can hit a bunch of card types, that seems good. I worry about getting the impact you want when you have to actually spread it amongst all these card types. Like, I know that sounds weird, but in a lot of these scenarios, you're looking for very specific things. When you hit this moment, you're looking for either card advantage or your second copy of Atraxa to be able to keep the snowball rolling, which you can absolutely get here. So that's kind of cool. I do think, though, being limited to like one potential removal spell, one potential land, one potential creature might make it a little harder to capitalize on this than something like the Nib Mizzet, the 5-color Nib Mizzet that we played for a while. But maybe I'll be proven wrong on that. I think it's probably a fine card. It doesn't feel like a revolutionary card to me.
Yeah. I don't like that it's 7 mana and then I don't know, you're just putting like one thing into play, and it, lifelink on a big creature like that certainly matters in a lot of instances, but you're drawing a bunch of cards, but for any 7 mana card, I feel like you should probably be getting a bunch of cards off it too. So
yep. Yeah, and shields are down if this card is like, you tap out to play this, you get that burst of cards, they kill this, and then they kill you. Is a play pattern that I think will happen many times, which is very different from Titan of Industry.
Right. So you gotta have to make your choice of whether or not you want 7 mana card with immediate impact, but it's more of like small ball impact, or if you want like big amount of card advantage with little impact.
I'm leaning towards the small ball impact, a little bit more flexibility there.
I think so too. Last gold card, Voidwing Hybrid, UB/2/1, creature, Phyrexian Bat, flying, toxic 1. When you proliferate, return this from your graveyard to your hand.
Okay.
You have to like this, right?
I'm interested. A lot of value there. You find some good blocks for this card and get it back in the late game. And we talked about your early threat that's going to go ahead and present some poison stuff in our theoretical proliferate deck. This plays a little bit of offense and defense. Not great on the defensive side, but I think you could find enough value here where you're pretty happy playing Voidwing Hybrid.
I kind of just want to loot it away,
That's fine too, yeah.
All right. onto the artifacts.
Cool card. I think it's a cool card.
It is a cool card. Onto the artifacts. Sword of Forge and Frontier. 3 mana, artifact equipment, equip 2. Equipped creature gets +2/+2 and has protection from red and green. Whenever equipped creature deals combat damage to a player, exile the top 2 cards of your library. You may play those cards this turn. You may play an additional land this turn.
Swords are very, very hard to evaluate. Very hard. They require such a tremendous upfront investment. Kind of like what removal they shut down matters a lot. What blocks they shut down matters a lot. And then their effects are often very complicated to assess. As far as swords go, this would be in like my C tier of swords right now. If I have Feast and Famine up there in the S tier, and then probably below that, just below that, we're talking like Fire and Ice. Although, I think there's some argument that those swap back and forth. B tier, we're in the Sword of War and Peace type range. And then you get to your C tier of swords, which is where I think Forge and Frontier fits. Having said that, I could be 1000% wrong on this card.
I think this card rules.
Okay. Now, is that a tier ranking of swords ruling, or is it just you like this card?
It's not Feast and Famine. It's not Fire and Ice, although I think that Fire Ice is way worse now as creatures have gotten a lot better.
For sure.
So this doesn't deal with anything on the battlefield, which is not great, but in sort of like the Feast and Famine way, this is just a thing that's an engine. And I like it for that. But also I think that pro red and green are both very, very strong also, because red gives you protection from a lot of the removal, green gives you a lot of protection from blocking creatures, and even just this as sort of like your card advantage-y thing that you want to side in against grindy decks or whatever, I think that this is awesome.
So, give me a sword ranking. Where does this sit on your sword hierarchy? Are we up to 9 swords now, or do we have all 10?
I honestly don't know. I know that there were some in like the Modern Horizon sets or whatever, and like,
that were mostly worse than the ones that hit like the constructed sets.
They were pretty bad. I think that those were like intentionally pretty tame.
Yep.
It was just like, we have to complete the cycle, whatever.
6, 7.
This is in definitely
8,
like the top half of swords for me.
9, 10. We have the full cycle.
Oh boy.
All swords exist. So there's. Well, let's go through the swords. I'm interested in having this conversation. I don't know why. Sword of Body and Mind. That's our green and blue sword. Sword of Feast and Famine, green, black. Sword of Fire and Ice, red, blue. We talked about. Sword of Forge and Frontier. That is this card. Sword of Hearth and Home. I believe that one just came out. That is
Link?
Green, white. Green, white. Search library for a basic land card. Search exile up to 1 creature card. Yeah. Not very interesting.
Blink a thing, get a land?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sword of Light and Shadow, which, wasn't
that
a
one's good
card for a while. Yeah, I like that
one's
one.
Good.
Sword of Sinew and Steel. I believe that's the one from the first Modern Horizons. Black-red.
Is that Shatter discard?
Destroy up to 1 target planeswalker, up to 1 target artifact.
Oh, yeah. Because they didn't want to redo the Raven's Crime thing. So that one is just like super narrow.
Yep, very narrow.
But Pro Black Red is the best removal stuff. So.
Yeah. Sword of Truth and Justice. That's the white-blue sword. +1/+1 counter on a creature you control, then proliferate. That's from Modern Horizons as well. I don't remember this card at all.
Yep, no thanks.
And Sword of War and Peace. Red-white sword.
Which is also.
Yeah. So I think I have this at 5th place on my sword list right now.
This might be 3rd for me.
Okay. I have it behind Feast and Famine, Fire Ice, Light and Shadow, and War and Peace.
I would do Feast and Famine, then Fire Ice, then this, then Light Shadow, then War and Peace.
Okay. Maybe that's correct. Maybe I'm being too generous to War and Peace's legacy when I put it as high as I am. It doesn't see much play these days, so
that one was really good, right? Like
it was.
but it was so narrow in its application. That was kind of the problem. But like there were definitely
game stealer though, an absolute game stealer.
Right, but there are also games where it's like you're kind of hell-bent, they're kind of hell-bent, like just really doesn't do a whole lot of anything. So I was kind of frustrated by that aspect. But then there are the games where it's like your opponent just has a bunch of cards that are like dirtling around and you just like one-shot them with it and just like, all right, this is silly. But I don't know, man. I feel like in a lot of instances, probably like any sword is getting you pretty far ahead. It doesn't outright kill them, but you know. So Light and Shadow, very good, just like kind of narrow. I think people really love Body and Mind for some reason. I think it mostly stinks.
No, yeah, I think it mostly stinks as well.
I don't know, man. I like this one a lot. It's weird that it doesn't do a whole lot. Like, you know, say 5 mana, you play it, equip it, connect it, like you get an extra land drop, and maybe it comes from the top 2 cards of your deck too. So like you are getting to ramp off it, but it's like you either need to untap with it or have it played kind of early and then connect with it with some mana open or something. But I think that those are all pretty reasonable asks. And like, once you get this going, it's going to be pretty difficult to lose. So,
yeah, I can see that. I don't think we're too far off in our assessment. I think maybe my assessment of the historical swords is a little higher than yours is all that's going on here, but, good sword talk, bro. Glad we got to revisit all the swords today.
Tight. And that's it. No more swords.
Okay.
Forever.
Cool. That's good. I've had enough.
All right. Argentum Masticore. Talking about throwbacks on throwbacks on throwbacks. 5 mana, 5/5, artifact creature, Phyrexian Masticore. First strike, protection from multicolored at the beginning. Like, protection from multicolored is good, okay? But like there's also like a multicolored edict. So I'm just laughing at how all of these cards are like very weak to that card. Anyway, at the beginning of your upkeep, sacrifice this unless you discard a card. When you discard a card this way, destroy target non-land permanent and opponent controls with mana value less than or equal to the mana value of the discarded card. I think this card also rules.
Very cool. Very cool card. I am curious how big the protection from multicolored actually is. It seems pretty significant to me, honestly.
It's just good.
First blush. And yeah, man, destroying stuff on your Masticore discard is quite an upgrade from where we started. And
I mean, that was kind of the problem with it, right? It was like OG Masticore now, 2 mana, 1 damage. That doesn't kill like everything.
Doesn't do anything. Doesn't
like
do
it
anything.
did back then, right? And then Razormane was like, okay, like you don't have to pay. It'll just, you know, deal 3 damage or whatever it did. And then there's the one from Scars, I think, that was like 4 mana to deal 4 or something, which was like fine, but super clunky. And this is just like, this is a Masticore for the modern age. You know what I mean?
Just does the thing. And I think if you find a spot where the multicolor protection matters and you like get a little value from your discard engine and pretty happily turning big spells into removal spells, you know, this theoretical graveyard based deck that we've talked about a little bit maybe benefits from a card like this, just really bridging the gap very effectively. And getting you to your heavy hitters before they take over and just destroying whatever the best thing on your opponent's side of the field is. Now, I don't think this is like a defining card. I wouldn't be shocked if this sees 0 play, but I do think there is some potential upside here and something worth exploring.
Yeah, I do think it's a sideboard card, right? But you might remember how big of a stopper Razormane Masticore was. Like 5 mana, 5/5, first strike. This is the exact same thing, which is like, oh, that shouldn't have held up, but it kind of does, honestly. And I don't know, like the 5th toughness is definitely a big deal. And
attacks really well into the type of creatures that clog up battlefields these days. So.
Yeah, and the fact that you're just getting like free mana every turn that this is around. Like obviously you need spells to discard to this, so that could be the problem, right? It's like, what if you're kind of like flooded and are not able to kill a bunch of stuff? Then that's kind of a feel bad. But I feel like if you want it in a specific matchup, you're going to know that, and you're going to have to like build your deck in such a way where it's like, well, I know I need to kill a bunch of 4-drops, so I need to keep that sort of stuff lying around to discard, right?
Well, what's the thing we talk about all the time is you just don't run out of cards, right? So where cards are not a restrictive point any longer, Argentum Masticore becomes a lot more appealing.
No, it's certainly true. It is weird though, because this is the type of thing that it's like, you know, you just go to your draw step immediately, like a new player or someone who's like not used to playing in paper or whatever, and it's just like your thing is dead. You know? It's like they don't they don't really make those cards anymore. So it is kind of funny to see the throwback here, but hopefully it just won't come up that often. It'll be fun.
Yeah, I think it'll be okay-ish is how I evaluate it.
Yeah. Filigree Sylex, 2 mana, legendary artifact, tap, put an oil counter on this, tap, sack this, destroy each non-land permanent with mana value equal to the number of oil counters on this. Tap, remove 10 oil counters from among permanents you control and sacrifice this. It deals 10 damage to any target. Like Powder Keg, or what was the other one?
Ratchet
Bomb. Yep. Yeah, so we got that. This is legendary. Not that you ever really wanted a bunch of Ratchet Bombs in play at the same time, but this can also, I don't know, just be like the win condition in your oil proliferate deck. This combos with the Phyrexian Furnace red guy, I guess, too.
It does. And that seems okay-ish, I guess. Like, I don't know. These cards are always so important when they exist, right? Like they just are catch-alls that sort of redefine what every deck in the format can do when you have access to things like this. And it really shapes what strategies can be successful. I think you're just supposed to ignore the last part for the most part. Like it's just not. It's a trap. It's a trap.
Normally, I would agree with you, but I think that there's enough stuff in the set that makes it interesting.
I will agree with it as interesting. I have a hard time because remember, once you do this stuff, like once you commit to this idea, I'm going to make 10 oil counters, you lose this thing's threat as a removal spell, and it's legendary. So it's not like you can bring down an additional one. So if your deck is focused around using this,
it's from among permanents you control. It doesn't just have to be this thing.
Yeah. Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
If it was just this, it's like, yeah, don't ever take this up to 6 or whatever, you dingus. Like, what are you doing? You know, you're not going to get there. But the fact that it's like your other stuff, it seems more feasible.
Yeah, nothing like in this type of setup, nothing stands out to me as the thing I'm going to accumulate a lot of oil counters on. For the most part, I'm using oil counters in more aggressive slants thus far, just based on what I've seen.
Yeah, so it's weird to put a Powder Keg in your deck.
It's weird to put a Powder Keg in your deck, exactly.
But I put a lot of the cards on the list that were the experiment ones and
of
like
course.
The R01 trample, because they look good as oil counter things. I kind of skimmed the rest of them.
Yeah, I will revisit at some point, and then maybe at that point I come around to this idea of Filigree Sylex as your win condition.
All right, so check this out. Tablet of Completion, 2 mana artifact. Tap, put an oil counter on this. Tap, add C, activate only if this has 2 or more oil counters on it. 1 tap, draw a card, activate only if this has 5 or more oil counters on it.
Very, very slow mana route, but a 2
which is not bad. Yeah,
2 mana rack. That doesn't really happen all that much anymore. We don't get Fellow or Stone type output. We get 3 mana.
Right, and this is only on delay 1, because you get a counter immediately. Turn 3, you take it up. Turn 4, it's active. And then anytime that you don't need it for mana, you can oil counter on it, or you can proliferate on this. Then it can become a draw engine, or can feed the Sylex.
Yep.
Right.
And it doesn't lose those counters ever. Like they're just there. It's a constant tick up.
It's not like the Arbor Elf.
Yeah.
You have to actually spend them.
When this becomes 1 draw card, it's pretty impressive. So I'm kind of a believer in this card. I want this to be good on its face, I think. I'm still not drawn into the idea of I'm throwing a bunch of oil counters around. I just want this to be an effect I naturally want. If that is the case, you can sell me on it. But yeah, there's a lot of upside here. A lot of upside.
Yeah. I think that this card is fine, but in the context of what are the non-aggro things that get oil counters, like this fits the bill, certainly. Rounding out the artifacts, we have a Prophetic Prism reprint, which I think is not going to excite many people, but
That excites me. That card matters a lot.
It excites me too. So just note that down. And then we have a cycle of Spell Bombs, which is also kind of exciting to me, even though it probably shouldn't be. I don't know. I think I like Spell Bombs too much. But the two that I picked out are Draw Spell Bomb, which is 1-mana artifact. Pay 1 and sacrifice it to draw a card, or you can pay 2B and sacrifice this. Return target creature from your graveyard to your hand, draw a card, activate only as a sorcery.
Ooh, +2 cards there.
Yeah, not bad. And it's just
that's a big deal.
1-mana artifact that sits around. You can cycle it whenever you want. Other one I kind of like is Furnace Spellbomb. 1-mana artifact, 1, sack this, draw a card. 1R, sack this, put 2 oil counters on target artifact or creature you control, draw a card. Activate it as a sorcery.
+2 on your beatdown guy, +2 damage out of nowhere, where it's damage equal to oil counters, right? So something there for sure. And again, plus a full card still. So
yeah, and just a 1-mana artifact that you can cycle on the cheap if there are, like, say the white, blue, and green ones are not all that exciting. And I mean, I think the blue one is still fine. It's like a 3-mana on summon. Like if you're doing any sort of like artifact stuff, like these are good pieces. Like we talked about the crappy like blue 2-drop that when it dies you draw a card. Like these are kind of like better versions of that.
Yeah, I don't think I would really sleep on the green one either. Like +3/+3 and trample in a lot of spots. Plus you get a card that can be quite impactful, quite game ending, given the sizing of some of these green creatures.
Yeah, that's fair. It's just like sorcery speed, and you're talking about like, oh, you get to draw a card too, and it's like, well, hopefully they're just dead, right? So that probably doesn't matter all that much. But yeah, if you care about having artifacts lying around, spell bombs are great. And then last up, we have some spheres, which is a cycle of lands that ETB tapped, and then they tap for their color of mana, right? So there's a white one, a red one, whatever, and then it's all 1C tap, sack this, draw card.
That's cool. Is there a sphere payoff beyond this?
There is an artifact that's like Journeyer's Kite for like spheres or the Mirren lands or whatever.
Yeah. So
yes, I don't really remember anything past that.
Yeah, I'm just doing a quick peruse of the lands in this set, and I'm not seeing it immediately. So
okay, so Mirrex is a sphere. Oh, there was a thing that was like for you need like 7 lands, and they need to be like different spheres.
Was that like an artifact or?
I'm looking. Oh no, it was actually the Journeyer's Kite. So it's a 2-mana artifact, 3 taps, search your library for a basic sphere or locust land card, reveal it, put it in your hand, then shuffle. 3, this becomes a 9/9, loses all abilities, gains indestructible and toxic 9. Activate it only if there are 9 or more lands with different names among the basic sphere and locust lands you control.
That is a weird card.
No, I don't know. Yes, but no.
Weird card.
Yes, but no.
Like 3 search for a land is that good?
No, because it's put in your hand. I didn't even like the kite when it was around.
Okay. Well, hopefully somebody has fun building their sewer deck.
Yeah, it's like Maze's End, but really bad.
Yeah. Well, so it's kind of like Maze's End.
Yeah, but okay, so the Gates thing had its time.
Yep. No,
right.
Big Gate fan here, you know that. So
that's it, man. That's the set. We'll be back next week with our top 10. Did we get you enough time to prep for your meeting?
I will make it happen. I'm gonna go hop in the shower right now and run along and make some flesh and blood cards.
All right, cool, man. Well, thank you for joining us. I know it's you're doing a lot of stuff. I get it. So I do appreciate the time.
Happy to share my time with you and our listeners, Gerald. And I hope people are still enjoying my takes, despite the fact that I just simply don't have the time to devote to this right now. I hope it's still interesting, and I hope I'm still providing value to everyone out there.
dude, your off the cuff takes or your very informed takes on like swords and masticores and stuff is pretty valuable. So
that's true. My deep sword knowledge coming in clutch again.
Game.
Good luck.